It is unquantifiable how many of the problems people struggle with in life, in business, some of the challenges they have. It's very difficult to see how much of that really comes down to mindset. I have seen it 100% in myself. I have seen it 100% in other people, where the shift in mindset really unlocks their true potential. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. We have an excellent guest who has a podcast that focuses specifically on the topic of mindset. We're going to talk about limiting beliefs. We're going to talk about why he started his podcast to focus exclusively on mindset. And most importantly, some of the most important key takeaways that he's had interviewing more than 50 ultra high performers in the real estate business, specifically on the topic of mindset. Now, if you love this program and you like the type of content that we've talked about over the years across multiple asset classes with titans in the industry leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, capital raisers, etc., you are going to love the Intelligent Investors Real Estate Conference. I rarely put my name on the line, and I'm telling you right now, there is no reason for me to throw a conference unless I thought it was going to be absolutely awesome. And I am extremely confident that if you can make it, the Intelligent Investors Conference in 2020 is going to blow your mind. We have some excellent guests. We actually just got an email confirming that CoStar is going to be there. They're an aggregator of data. They've spent millions of dollars aggregating data across the commercial real estate sector. They have so much information that they're going to share with you for free. I've got Antonio Marquez, who's the operating partner of our current fund, has purchased more than $700 million of commercial real estate. He's going to be there giving away free takeaways. Jason Post is going to be there, currently owns about 10,000 units. Jeremy Roll is going to be there. David Coe is going to be there. Matthew Owens is going to be there. Christina Suter is going to be there. It's going to be absolutely an all-star. We got the real estate guys are going to be there. Neil Bawa is going to be there. I could go on. There's more than 50 speakers. All of them kick butt. This conference is going to be awesome. If you haven't yet, go to intelligentinvestors2020.com. Get your ticket. Use ASYM for a discount code. It's going to give you $100 off the ticket price. Go ahead, do it right now, and I'll see you in January. All right, hope you enjoyed the episode. How's it going, everyone? Our guest for today is Steven Pesavento, who is the host of the Investor Mindsetpodcast, which is available on iTunes. Honestly, you should check it out. He's had some incredible guests, and I really like the theme of the show, which is about mindset, which is what we're going to talk about today. Steven, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So for the listeners that aren't familiar with you and your program, tell us a little about your background and also how you kind of transitioned into the real estate sector.
Yeah. So I, like a lot of real estate investors, always had that dream of kind of living this better life. And, I got introduced to Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was 17 and, Tim Ferriss shortly after in college. And so I had this idea that there was another way of living, but I wasn't quite there yet. So I started out working in management consulting for a number of years, ended up moving out, working in the tech sector, trying to get closer to the startup industry where there's just a lot more passion. I was kind of always on this little kick trying to find, well, where are the people who actually want to go to work every day, who are excited about doing this stuff? And I wasn't finding it in management consulting. And finally, just about 3 years ago, I made the jump into real estate full time. And I did so kind of starting out without any background or experience. Just one day, I finally had that moment where I felt strong enough. I felt convicted that I was going to go out and I was going to make this happen. I was going to do it. And for all those years before, I had all these limiting beliefs, these things that were holding me back. Because truly, I had this dream that when I was a kid, I either wanted to be like Bob Vila and flip houses, or I wanted to be like Emeril Lagasse and, make some incredible food. And I worked in kitchens for a long time, but I realized that was the lifestyle I wanted. And finally, right before I made the jump, I just had this moment where I realized wait, I can do this too. There's nothing that should hold me back. If I just decide to put everything I have into it, then I can find success. And so I jumped in with both feet.
Very cool. And kind of what is your day-to-day like in terms of the real estate side of your business?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So when I got started in real estate, like I said, I didn't have any experience. And so I kind of went out to find mentors, to find a way to really learn, how am I going to get really good at this thing? How am I going to learn from other people's experience and be able to accelerate that path so that I could be in a really great spot? And so I went into this for the same reason a lot of folks do, to be able to build passive income and to be able to live, off of that income. Of course, I went down the active route. I don't have that much passive coming in, because I'm a wholesaler and I'm a house flipper. And I've built a business that's fairly active on that front, mostly around, building great teams, doing some incredible marketing and sales, and going out and finding these properties, really doing deal finding acquisitions. So for me at this point, we've kind of shrunk the size of our team down. In my first 2 years, I did 150 deals. In the first 3 in total, I have done just over 200. And the last year has really been focused on how do I actually reduce the size of my team, focus on doing bigger deals with bigger profit margins so that I could really focus on things that I really love and care about, like the podcast and, living the life that I was set out on living.
Totally. You mentioned something there that I feel like you've really got a knack for. So I want to ask you a couple questions about it. You mentioned kind of identifying some people that you really thought could help you along the way, people that you were inspired by. First of all, how did you identify those people? And then also, of the ones that you've been able to learn from directly, how did you curate those relationships?
So at the end of the day, I'm a big believer in how do you go and find amazing people who know exactly what you know, who are living the life you want to live, and how do I get in front of them? How do I learn everything I can from them? And so I think there's a couple ways of doing that. When I first started out, the first mentors that I had were books, right? I grew up without a lot of money in, a household with a single mom and 4 kids, and, fortunately have a fantastic father as well. But, we just didn't have a lot growing up. And so we didn't have a lot of opportunity, but these books kind of gave me a little bit of a view into another life. And so it started out reading some great books, of course, jumping into podcasts like Tim Ferriss and learning from audios from Tony Robbins and some of his material. That really started kind of the path of, okay, how am I going to think about this stuff differently? And how am I going to go and find those people? And then when I actually went to go find real in life, like real mentors that I'm going to actually be able to sit down across or jump on a phone call with, because there's no way at that time that I was going to get on the phone with Tim Ferriss. Maybe I could have found a way, but I was able to learn so much just by listening to him on the podcast. So I commend all the listeners here for listening to Hunter and soaking up all this great information, because it's a great way to start. But then when I decided that I was going to do real estate, I literally remember the moment. I jumped up off my couch. I said, I'm doing this. I'm doing it right now. I fired all of my web development clients pretty much that day and said, hey, I'm going to transition you over to here. These people are going to take care of you from now on. And I just went in full force. I'm an all-in kind of guy. I don't recommend that for a lot of people, but I do think there's something about making that decision. And so when I actually went out to go find that mentor, it was the first real estate investor event I'd ever gone to. It was a Phoebe in Long Beach. Phoebe. Mm-hmm. It's where I first met Matt Owens, who is one of my many mentors. And I started making myself a regular at those events. But at this event in particular, I noticed that there was this flipper named Iris Veneration who was going to be speaking at that event. And I was super excited because I was like, oh, well, she's doing exactly what I want to do. I bet she knows exactly what I should be doing. Let me try to research how could I add value to her life? And I think this is a real big key. If you don't have money to hire a coach or mentor, then I recommend you definitely got to lead with value of some sort. And the money, for the record, if you're going to spend money on coaching and mentoring, the money you're paying those people isn't even close to worth the time that they're going to spend with you, but it's going to show that you're committed to working with them and that you want to commit yourself to doing those things. But with Iris, I went into this event. I had my little plan in my back pocket, and I remember waiting till at the end of the event. Everyone had talked with her. I was that last person kind of awkwardly hanging out. And I walked up to her and I said, hey, I noticed that you have a really ugly website. It's absolutely awful. I was a little nicer about this than I am right now, but that it looks like it's outdated. But fortunately, I run a web development company and I know exactly what we can do. And I can build you a $15,000 website for free. All I ask is maybe you allow me to follow you around to some job sites and kind of soak up some things through osmosis. And I don't expect much, but if I could just follow you around for a little bit, I'd really appreciate it. And before I could even finish the offer, her hand was, outreached, trying to shake and solidify that deal because I had made her an irresistible offer, something that was so valuable to her. I didn't make her come up with what that thing was that I would do for her. I thought to myself, I brainstormed and I had a hypothesis. And when I showed up and I made that offer, it was obviously a yes for her. And for the next 3 or 4 months, I remember I followed her around at a job site. I got to see a flip from start to finish. And I got to have that direct connection to somebody who could teach me the lingo about the things that how they work and what's important. And most importantly, that I could see that it's possible that somebody else is doing this, so that when I went back to those Phoebe events every single month, when I would meet with people, they'd see my progress. They'd see me using the language that represents that I know what I'm talking about. And more of those relationships started happening. And that's really the way that I got started. I just found a local mentor. I followed him around. I offered a ton of value, and I built a friendship out of it.
Man, that's great. I really like that, especially since there's so many times that I've heard people that are in a similar situation where they wait till the networking event is slowly starting to close down and they're the last person this one particular person talks to. I've heard that story many times. So if you're young and you're out there and you're looking for a mentor, don't be afraid to wait as the networking event starts to die down, because you can have a little bit more time one-on-one with this person that you're interested in. I really like the fact that you went in there with the plan. Definitely speaks to kind of the initiative that you were taking, which I know people that are high performers tend to be very drawn to. So obviously, mentors have played a big role in your life. They've played a big role in my life as well. One of the things that I know that you've really focused on is the mindset component. Even in this conversation, you've already mentioned things like limiting beliefs and stuff. How did you come up with the idea to really build a podcast around the mindset component? And then walk us through some of the key takeaways that you've learned, kind of listening to some of the best talk about mindset, which is something that, some people think they want to overcome that. They want to skip that part of the real estate game, but it's really, really challenging to be successful if you aren't overcoming some of the mindset challenges.
So the reason that I built the Investor Mindset podcast and why I wanted to do this was because I knew the value of what changing my mindset meant to me, right? I had these limiting beliefs that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't have enough experience, that I didn't have enough money, or I didn't come from a wealthy family, or the list of excuses or beliefs that I had kept going on and on. I didn't know anybody who was doing this at the time. So what would make me think that I'm capable of doing it? But truly within there is a belief. And that belief pretty much acted like an anchor. It held me back from being able to move forward. And it was once that I realized that it's possible to pull up those anchors to learn how you can overcome those things. And it's what really accelerated my growth, both personally and professionally. And it's the thing that I keep going back to, because no matter how much success I find in my career or personal life, mindset is something that I have to keep growing at, because once you hit another tier, another level, all of a sudden there's a new set of expectations and things that are going to get you, exactly where you want to go. So I started this because I thought, well, I've learned so much about this. It's made such a difference for me. I know other people have got to have some of these same questions. And I just wanted an opportunity I really did it I call it my 4 C's of why I think it's worth it for me to spend the time and invest the time in building an amazing platform to really reach and connect with a lot of people. The first reason was I wanted to build community. I wanted to be able to connect with listeners and other people who really thought the same way that I thought, that had a commitment to personal growth and knew that they're capable of great things, even if right now their outside world isn't showing up to it. I wanted to connect with amazing speakers, people like you, people like Rod Khleif, Mike Hambright, Joe Fairless. The list keeps going on. A ton of really awesome people. I got to connect with these speakers and spend, a good 30, 45 minutes, an hour really learning from them, asking the questions that I want to learn and that I know that other people in my community are get value out of. I wanted to create some amazing content that I knew would be valuable to that community. And I wanted to have a way for me to capitalize on the time that I was investing. And to me, capitalizing on it could just be that relationship. It could be that email that I get or that message that I get from somebody who says, hey, you know what? That really changed my day or changed my life. Or it could be, monetizing, where you're actually making money doing the thing that you absolutely love. So I went down this path because I knew that mindset, it's the secret key that unlocks so much potential that so many people don't believe that they're actually looking for. Everyone's looking for the tactic. They want to know, how do I go find that next deal? How do I find the money? But the truth is, if you know all the tactics and you have a crappy mindset, you're not going to do anything. And so often people know exactly what to do, but they're not doing it. And the truth is, below the reason they're not doing that is one of those anchors I talked about. And fortunately, through the podcast and through some of the relationships and coaching that I've been able to be a part of, we're able to help people pull up those anchors and really move forward a lot faster.
Yeah, man, I really like that. I'll tell you what, people are either looking for tactics or they're looking for excuses, neither of which are the underlying change that they're really trying to find. And so something very common in the real estate business. It is a business where typically you make money slowly. Okay. And so there's a lot of people that are extremely wealthy that have passed down wealth for many, many years to come. And so it's very common in the real estate business. If someone's successful, you kind of want to figure out, okay, what's the excuse here? Why is this person so successful? It's easy to say, look at their dad. They're super successful. That's the reason why they're successful. Therefore, I can check out and I don't have to use their success as a template for my own kind of thing. And from my perspective, what you're talking about, you mentioned it twice now. I didn't come from a family that was extremely wealthy. And that was kind of a thought in your head, like that was going to be a major challenge for you. From my perspective, that component, the reason that having a wealthy family can be very helpful, can also be very hurtful.
Yes.
People are mostly familiar with that. But the reason it can be helpful is that if you're taught at a young age that no matter what happens, that failing is not going to be that consequential, if you use that in the right light, if you see that potential in the right light, that can actually help you a lot. Now, the challenge is most people, when they hear if you fail, it's not going to hurt you, they take it the wrong way. They take it, okay, well, watch this. Then they can't kick me out of school if I do this bad stuff because my dad bought the library or whatever. But if you can tune into that, it doesn't, what I'm trying to get at is you don't have to have money to alleviate yourself from that fear. It's just a lot easier if you do. Okay. So what the key here is that I know people that had that attitude, but they didn't have $1 in the bank and they were able to succeed because of that. So if I can instill that attitude into people's minds, regardless of their financial situation, the mindset is going to take over. Hopefully there was a point in that rant.
It was absolutely fantastic. And I want to build on that. I think there's a wonderful story, and politics aside, because I could care less about him politically, but I think it's an inspiring story and really underlines this point, is that Donald Trump, when he was, I can't remember the exact amount, $100 or $200 million in debt, he may have filed bankruptcy. He had lost a ton of money in his real estate business, and he was in a really bad financial spot. And he was looking around, he was saying, that person over there, they are actually richer than me because I'm millions of dollars in debt. But the difference was inside of his head, he truly believed that he had all of the capabilities to be $100 millionaire, a billionaire, ultra wealthy. He believed that he deserved it. He believed that he was capable of it. And he believed that he was going to be wealthy again. And so, yeah, he lost a ton of money, but he made a ton more back. And so I don't want to tell you to be like Donald Trump, but what I do want to tell you to be like is recognize when you have a belief that maybe it doesn't go in alignment with that. And think about how powerful that would be, even if you're not wealthy right now, if you truly internalize the fact that I am worthy of making all this money. I am worthy of having this. I'm capable of it and I'm going to do it. It's already pretty much done. I just have to catch up to that point in my life where it's there. And I'm going to do everything right today and every day forward till I get there, and you'll be there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the listeners of this program, they're not typically very political. And so they aren't going to take that for a political statement. And they certainly won't take the statement I'm about to make either. The one thing about Donald Trump that I can also mention about that is that clip of him from back in the day where he says, my parents gave me a small loan of $1 million, which by the way is hilarious. That is a good reason to check out. And a lot of people see that and say, okay, so the fact that he was able to get a small loan of $1 million is the reason that he had massive success in the real estate business. And that is, nothing could be further from the truth. There's a lot of people that had access to $1 million that floundered and failed. It's like, who's the most famous real estate investor of all time? Probably Donald Trump, prior to even being the presidency. I don't think it's because his dad was able to give him $1 million. You know what I mean? Now, that certainly helped for sure. But the reason I think it really, really, really helped is because he knew that he could take a risk to fail. And you can do that without having any money. All right, let's transition because I know I want to get to some of these key takeaways. You've had the opportunity to interview how many? More than 50 people, right?
Yeah, more than 50. I think we're going on 60, 65 right now.
And these are some all-stars. So I want to get some of the takeaways. Now, some of those takeaways, they may be takeaways that people actually said, and some may be even things that you've inferred from what they've said. So I want to hear some of your most important takeaways and what you kind of inferred from the information and the conversations you've had.
Yeah, I mean, there is a ton. And so it's actually pretty hard to distill this down because there's so much information here. But there's a couple that I think are really important. And the first one I want to talk about is one that everyone already knows, right? They already know that they should be ultra focused, that they should focus on one thing and they should do that one thing really well and build upon that from there. But so often I hear the opposite, especially from new investors and especially from investors that have been in the business for a little bit and are getting a little bit they're getting a little bit bored with what they're doing. So they're going to try like 3 or 4 different things. The one big takeaway was that majority of these folks who are very, very successful, they chose to drill down on one asset class or one specific strategy at a time until they were an absolute expert at it. And then at that point, they might add something else into it. And then that became part of that one thing. Because the example goes, if you're trying to do assisted living and flipping houses and buying multifamily, you're not really going to do any of those very well. Maybe if you started out and you've been flipping houses for a really long time and then you added on another strategy, that wouldn't be as big of a thing, but it's harder for you to become an expert at 2 things while you're trying to learn all of them at once. And a really good story is actually an example of this is Joe Fairless, episode 7 of the Investor Mindset podcast. He talks about how he built this multifamily empire while having only a handful of employees. It blew my mind. At the time when I interviewed her, I had 15 people on my team. I'm now down to 4. And the reason for that is because he was able to get super focused on exactly what he was doing, focus on multifamily, his 1 or 2 strategies to help him grow there, the podcast being one of them. And he hired out contractors or partners to do almost everything else. And in that time, he's grown to over $750 million of assets under management. And he's done that by going at it from a super focused approach. And I've seen this with nearly almost every person that I've talked with. They've got their one thing. I mean, even you, Hunter, you've got one strategy that you use that applies to a number of different asset classes. And it's, I think, one of the key reasons why you're successful. And I know there's a lot, but it definitely goes to show, what a little bit of focus will do for you.
No, I really like that. And yeah, I completely agree. And my model is a little bit interesting because I completely agree with you, so much so that we have decided to leverage the experience of other operating partners, which has allowed us to participate, right? So I'm not a jack of all trades. I've got a very specific niche job that just not a lot of people do. So yeah, completely agree there.
That's awesome. It's so true. And I mean, so if you're listening to this right now and if you're trying to do too many things, let's just stop. I just got done interviewing Jay Papasan from The One Thing, Gary Keller's partner and author. And, he's been living this one thing for the last 10 years since they wrote the book. They haven't put out a lot of other books, actually, any. They're putting out another one soon here. But one of the big things that was the takeaway was that it's one of the hardest things to do to say no to all these good things that are out there. But when you can say no to the good things that are out there for the great things, to have the space to have that great thing come into your life, good things will happen. So I really want to encourage people to get focused.
Completely agree.
So another big takeaway was the way that some of these experts and leaders view challenge. And as you remember from your interview, which was a phenomenal episode, and what episode number was that? I know you guys played that on your podcast as well. Was that episode 100?
Yeah, we'll link to that in the show notes page. Yeah, 101 or it's either 100 or 101. But yeah, I appreciate that.
So what I noticed, because I ask this question every single time, what was one of the challenges that you dealt with growing up? We end up getting into how people look at challenges and how they reframe them. And for the most part, one thing that everyone had in common is that no matter whether it was at childhood, whether it was in adolescence, or whether it was in their real estate business, they look at those challenges as actually being an opportunity for them to grow, to learn. And oftentimes they look back at that challenge as being the reason that they're successful. a story here, Mark Owens, episode 47 from the podcast, he talks about his experience of hitting rock bottom. And it's a really cool story, really cool episode, because he was addicted to drugs. He ended up going to prison, and nobody ever knew this. He has never talked about this story publicly before this episode, but he ended up discovering this book, and this book changed his mindset. And that book was You Can If You Think You Can, from Norman Vincent Peale. But the point being, this challenges in his life could be the excuse, the reason why he could never go out and do anything after he got out of prison. But the truth was, it was exactly the reason why he had to go out and do it. And so he flipped it on its head. And instead of that being the thing that's going to hold him back, he made it the thing that's going to drive him forward. And for a little inspiration, he now owns over 100 properties, nearly free and clear, and, just doing some incredible things in the single family space.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I feel like there's been a lot of talk on social media about this, and I really love it, to be honest, because a while back, social media seemed to be a place where it was just about sharing your wins. It was about being in front of the car, being in front of the house, being in front of the food, being in front of the travel that you're going on. And now, you've got guys like David Goggins who are like, you need to embrace the grind, where it's like, if you can harden your mind to see challenges as opportunities, you basically start to see through the matrix. You become Neo, where it's like, oh, good. This meeting that I had where everything was on the line didn't go well. Good. What can I learn from that so that next time it can? And the higher the stakes are, the more significant those challenges are. And once you start to realize that the stakes are only going to get higher if you keep continuing to execute, you start to be invincible.
Yeah, it's totally true. And I mean, both Don Costa and Rod Khleif were interviewed on the podcast. You've probably talked to some of these guys as well, but Rod lost over $50 million of net worth in 2008. And Don ended up coming out of that recession over $1 million in debt because he had a judgment against him. Both of these people could have looked at that as saying, hey, I'm done. I've thrown in, all my chips are on the table. I've crapped out. I'm done. But instead, they looked at both of those people, refer back to those moments as a redefining point, a point where they decided that, okay, well, what are the challenges that I'm learning from these lessons, and how am I going to build a business differently moving forward so that I never have to deal with this again? And if I do, what am I going to learn from that in that exact moment? Completely agree.
All right. Next takeaway. Let's talk about it.
So it's really important to have clear goals and a plan to work from. And it seems obvious. A lot of these seem obvious, but frankly, most people aren't doing this stuff. They're not really living it. They know it, but they're not putting it into what they're actually doing. And so pretty much every guest had super clear goals. They knew exactly what they were supposed to do to achieve those goals, meaning they had an actionable plan that they were working from, and they reviewed them often. So they knew whether they were on track or off track towards getting there. And, many people say, well, yeah, goal setting is really important, but it's incredibly important that you do it in the right way, that you figure out, okay, well, how am I going to connect this to what my next point is going to be, purpose? How am I going to connect these goals to my purpose? And then how am I going to do these daily actions towards getting me there? And so I saw that nearly every single conversation I had.
Oh, yeah, man. And so here's the thing with goal setting. If you want to create a clear battle plan for yourself, like some people struggle to create a 1 year, a 5 year, a 10-year plan because it seems like it's too far away, or it seems like it's not quantifiable enough. It's like not something that they can do today, basically. So like, let's say whatever the business is, your KPI of your particular business or whatever line of work you're in, whatever you're trying to accomplish. If you can come up with, let's say, I really like a 3-year plan because it's long enough so that you can kind of put yourself, there's some distance in between you and the goal, but also it's not too long. So it starts to get way out into the horizon. Whatever your metric is, let's say you want to have 300 investors by the end of the next 3 years. Back that out on a annual, quarterly, monthly, daily goal. Reverse engineer what you would have to have on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. And then you understand on a, like, as you continue to check in on yourself every week, let's say, you can see, am I doing a good job or not? And when you start to break it down like that and you start to reverse engineer it like that, it starts to become, man, this is totally achievable. All I have to do is stay on track. The challenge, though, is that people set these goals, they forget about them. At the end of the year, they haven't accomplished it. It's because they didn't reverse engineer them and create some accountability with themselves, some transparency with their actual business. So do you have any tips in terms of creating that transparency, in terms of creating that accountability?
I think one of the big things is you just got to get clear on what it is that you want and why you want it. But then you build that action plan, like you said, and you break it down into specific steps. So what I like to do, and what a lot of folks that I've learned from like to do, is that they'll set out that plan and they'll break it out monthly, quarterly, weekly, and then daily. But then each week they're actually setting out what is it they're going to do. And at the end of the week, they review, how did I actually do on it? And what they're doing there is they're not jumping on to beat themselves up. They're not jumping on to say, oh, well, you didn't do that, and so you suck and blah, blah, blah. Sure, if that's what they need to do to themselves to get themselves motivated, they'll do it. But more so, it's just keeping them on track. I look at the goals or this plan as a map about how they want to get where they want to go. And if you're not looking at the map very often and you keep going in the wrong direction for too long, it's going to take you a lot longer to get back on track. So that's one thing. The other thing that I think is really important is building some accountability. And for some people, they're totally 100% motivated internally. And if that's the case, awesome, because you're going to be driving yourself. You just got to make sure you put yourself in the right direction and you'll get there. But for a lot of people, they're both, or they're externally motivated. And so it can be great there as you put yourself in a mastermind, or you find an accountability buddy, or better yet, you hire a coach, somebody who's going to help be a mirror to you, to help you understand what's important, to help understand where you are committed to being, and then somebody who's willing to call you out when you're not actually on track. When someone is able to hold you accountable and say, you know what, you said spending more time with your family was important, but what I noticed was you talked about you've been staying late at work the last 4 or 5 nights. Sounds like there's a priority challenge there. You got to get your priorities back in line. So I think it's really helpful. I have a few different coaches for different things in my life, and I know that they really help me to, be the best person I can be.
Yeah, I really like that. Get a witness. That's what I say. Get a witness. So for some people that are even internally motivated, which I believe that I am myself, I really actually get a lot of my internal motivation from external factors. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but I spend most of my time working alone, right? But yeah. I set up accountability by saying, look, I'm going to launch this book on December 2nd. Right? The book has not been written. I'm saying I'm going to launch this book on December 2nd. Now, what do I have to do to make good on that promise to the people that I've said that to? A lot of internal motivation to get to that point since I've created some accountability. So I like to do a little combination of both. Very cool. Anything else you want to talk about in terms of that, or you want to switch to the next one?
So let's move on to the next one here. This is one that I'm really passionate about, and I would have led with it, but I didn't want to blow you guys away because I'm a little bit passionate and excited about it. But it's this whole idea of living with a clear purpose. Talking about your why. And everybody talks about it. We've all read the book Starting with Why, or we've watched the TED Talk, or we've heard somebody bring this up. And, a lot of people are like, oh, hey, I don't need none of that. I know my why. My kids are my why. Or, having financial freedom is my why. And for a lot of people, that's true. Those things are part of their clear purpose. But they might actually not be the level of specificity that I'd recommend and that I think a lot of the successful people have. And it's actually when you can get to this depth of understanding from an emotional level and being really attached to that, why it's important for you to live that purpose, why it's important for these things to happen, and what it's going to feel like if they do, and what it's going to feel like if they don't. And so let me give you a little bit of an example here. So for a lot of people, they'll bring up and say, well, my family's my purpose, and they'll put up a little slide if they're talking at a conference, and they'll show a picture of their kids or their wife. And that's great. I love that. I don't have a wife and kids, but they are a part of my purpose, the future purpose. But below the surface is a lot more reasons. And for that example, you might ask yourself, okay, well, for me to succeed in this business, what is it going to be like if I don't hit the goal that I said was important? How is that going to affect me on my life's purpose, on my path? And how is that going to affect the people that are important to me? So if you're looking at family as being the purpose, what I'd probably recommend is continue to ask yourself, why is that important? And you might end up going 3 or 4 or 5 layers deep. So if I'm looking at this this family example, I might say, well, why are they your purpose? Well, because I want to be able to give them the best life that they can live because they deserve it. And I want my kid to be able to go to college and not have to worry about money the way that I lived. And well, why is that important? Because, I want to be able to give them something that I've never given them. And as you continue to ask these questions, you start to get more emotional. You start to understand why that's connected. And so in that example, maybe you reach all the way down and you realize like, wow, if I don't actually fulfill what I believe I'm capable of doing, I'm going to be letting my family down. I'm going to be letting my kids down. I'm going to be setting a bad example for them. And if you're motivated by pain or negative emotions, then that's going to be a driver. Now, on the flip side, if you think about the future tense, about how that is going to feel absolutely incredible, about how amazing that's going to be able to take that vacation around the world with your family, or to be able to spend more time at their baseball game, or be able to coach their soccer, or if it's just purely about financial freedom or being able to be location independent, if you kind of visualize yourself living that life and feeling truly deeply inside what that emotionally feels like, you're going to feel those emotions and that's going to push you forward. And so when you can get emotionally attached to this purpose, emotionally attached to this why, it ends up acting like rocket fuel and can really drive you super fast forward in the direction that you want to be.
Yeah, man, the rocket fuel, that is exactly right. And without it, it is like a rocket without fuel. You can get only so far on sheer willpower. There have been a lot of studies about this. People's willpower, especially during a daily basis, is extremely limited, where you start to make less and less advantageous situations. If you're tempted by either things like social media, as it gets towards the end of the day, you start to run out. It's like you have a gas tank. It's going on E towards the end of the day. The same thing is true, I believe, over a weekly, monthly, annual basis. So the way that you kind of be cognizant of that, first of all. Second of all, the way to energize yourself. It's like, what am I doing getting out of bed? Like, what is the reason that I'm going to actually start working at 7 a.m. or work late or whatever it is? Like, what is the reason that I actually need to create systems and processes that allow me to have free time? What is the reason that I'm spending all this time thinking about this stuff or reading these books or anything? If you don't have a clear version of that, eventually you will go through some kind of burnout. And it is not necessary. It is absolutely not necessary. And it feels a lot better if you know your motivating factor, and I really like to tie it into some moral obligation. If you feel like it's not a matter of, hey, whether I can have 3 zeros in my bank account or 6 zeros in my bank account, it's like, what is the moral reason that you have to get out there and put the work in?
I totally agree with you. And I think one other thing it's nice to attach it to is a real person. It doesn't necessarily have to be family. It could be somebody that you volunteered for, or some kid that you saw that was living in a bad environment, or an image of what that could be like, and that you've got to create a better world. And when you can attach it to a person, a human being, I think it can be very motivating because that's real. That's one person's life that you're going to affect by doing this. And I think it's important too to underline why it's so critical to get connected to this. Because the more connected you get to it, the more clear you're going to be on exactly where you want to end up, so that you're not going on this journey for all of this time. And then all of a sudden you get there and you're thinking to yourself, well, wait, this isn't really what I wanted. I thought that's what I wanted, but I didn't really take the time to really understand why that was critical. And in a conversation with John Martinez, who was on the podcast as well, he's a really well-known, well-respected sales trainer in the home buying industry. If you're buying single-family homes directly from homeowners, this is the guy that you get trained from. But one of the key purposes, one of the key whys for him on building his business was he wanted to spend as much time with his family as possible. And more importantly, he didn't want to have to travel, because when he traveled, he spent a lot of time away from his family. And he felt out of it. He felt kind of depressed. He felt like not really super motivated. It took him more time to kind of get back into the swing of things. And I mean, seriously, we're talking about a sales trainer who doesn't go on the road, but is making 7 figures per month and has raving fans and has designed a business intentionally. But he was only able to do that because he was so clear on where he wanted to be once the business was up and running, and why it was important to him that no matter what challenges he went through on the way towards building that business, he was able to get there and be like, wow, I'm really proud of this. And this is exactly where I wanted to be.
Yeah, I really like it. Did we cover the 5 there? Did we get to 5?
We've got one. We've got one more.
Awesome.
We've got one more. And I think obviously all of the things that we've talked about are critical, but this is one that can really help wrap them all together. And it's this whole idea of finding amazing mentors and coaches. Boom. And I know you've learned from incredible mentors along the way. And I know I've learned from incredible mentors and coaches along the way. But it's the power of going out and finding the right people who've already been down the path ahead of you and can light the way, or the coaches, the people who can stand on the sidelines and say, hey, what you're doing over here is really great, but if you really want to go that extra mile, here's how you get there. And I want to be specific here because oftentimes these two words, mentor and coaches, are used interchangeably, but they're actually very different. And so a mentor is someone who's been there and done it. They have the direct experience, and you're going to follow in their footsteps. If you're going to hire a mentor, you're probably going to want to follow exactly what they do, or you're going to want to take pieces of what they do and you're going to apply it in your own business. But a coach, a great coach, doesn't even have to have done it, right? But they are often even better at helping you understand, as the coachee and the player, how are you going to do it better? And if you really think about the best athletic coaches, talent-wise, they aren't LeBron or Kobe. They're not going to be the best players in the field, but they are the best at getting the most out of talented people. And so when you're going out there to go and find these folks, you want to know, am I looking for a mentor, or am I looking for a coach? Or am I trying to find somebody who's that unicorn who maybe has both, who has been there, but also is phenomenal at really getting the most out of high performers? And I think that's a really big takeaway. Almost everybody that I talked to had some serious mentors or coaches in their life. Yeah.
I mean, I think that it is one of the most lucrative, efficient, best skills to have, is being able to use other people's success as a blueprint for your own. And if you can master that skill, and if you can also master the skill of attracting mentors to give you their information for free, the combination of those two are like deadly. This is actually something I'm going to talk about a little bit in my book, about kind of the indicators that really attract mentors. And there's one thing that mentors are just absolutely addicted to. It's momentum. And so one of the things I talk about is like, how do you show that your momentum is taking off? Like, it's very common that people enter the world of real estate, enter any world that they want to know about. They try to look around. They say, okay, who's going to help me accomplish these goals? They realize no one's going to help them. Then they say, okay, I've got to do it myself. And the ones that say, I've got to do it myself, all of a sudden, all the mentors they ever could want show up at their door ready to help, because the momentum starts to build on their own. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think momentum's absolutely key. And I think it's a great way to attract the right people, because like in the situation where I was talking about with my first mentor, I mean, I came in with the certainty I was going to do this. Yes. It was going to happen no matter what. So I would love to work with you if we can, but either way, I'm going down the path. I'm actually already there. I just wanted to look back and see if you wanted to come with me. If you have that kind of view, it goes, people want to jump on that train and help you because they know they're going to get a lot of fulfillment out of doing that.
Yes, that is exactly right. Because I think part of it is that they want the fulfillment for sure. People that are high performers generally have a very healthy relationship with competition. And they say, man, they're not only competitive about how much money they can make, it's about how much positive impact can they have on the world. So this is a great mechanism. Here's my boy, Steven, who's clearly going to take off like a rocket ship. I would love to have a big impact in the world by impacting his life, and then watching him later be in a position that's similar to mine so that he can help someone as well.
It's so true. I definitely think it's so true. And I'm going to be honest, I want to point out something that I had a real big limiting belief on paying for coaching and mentoring. You know, when I got started in the business, I specifically sought out to trade time for mentorship because, well, frankly, I didn't have any money. I was planning on getting into the business without having any. And obviously I was able to make that work looking at the track record. But at that time, I didn't really believe, I thought everyone was just out to take my money, and that these people were charlatans, or they didn't really know how to teach you how to do it. And I think there's a lot of bad players in the space, but I do think it's worth it to pay for mentors and coaches depending on your situation. Because if you go to the Olympics, you walk up to every single athlete and you ask, would you ever consider trying to do what you do without having a coach? They'd laugh at you and they'd tell you, well, I have 4 or 5 coaches. I've got a coach who teaches me exactly just how to do this one specific activity in my trade or my skill set. And so I think it's worth it to pay for them when you can find the right people. And I also think it's absolutely important to attract ones that are free that you can look up to, because they're going to be different people. The kind of person that you might attract, they might be the same type of people and they might be different. The people who are you going to attract for free, they're probably never going to charge for it, because that's just, they have a belief against charging for it. But the people who are going to charge for it, it's not as much charging for it for their benefit,
right,
as much as it is for your benefit.
Yes.
Because when you pay for something, you end up deciding to buy into it, that it's going to be amazing and you're going to get the most out of it. Because I've been in a lot of free training that I never went to or I never showed up to. And I've had a lot of people who have given me advice, but I didn't listen to any of it. But if I drop 30 G's on the table and I'm like, boom, I'm going to learn everything from you. This person right now is Yoda to me, and anything they say, I'm going to think, okay, well, does this make sense ethically and morally? But I'm going to do it because this person's been there. They've done it. They're giving me advice. I might challenge them on it so I can understand it better, but I'm going to put everything that I have into applying it because I want to get my money's worth. And so it ends up actually creating this like commitment device by either putting money down or being in a challenge or something like that, that you really can't get elsewhere.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. And I've seen that firsthand. I've seen a lot of incredible content go to waste. And as soon as I started creating my mentorship program and starting having people invest in the process, oh my gosh, the results have been extremely pronounced. Like, it's been one of the most surprising things I've had in my entire career. Not only the results, but also how much I've enjoyed that entire thing. So I completely agree with that. And I'm really happy that that is starting to come back, where there's this combination of all this great free content out on the internet, but to really take it to the next level, you need someone to kind of guide you through some of the challenging things and to go to a level of detail that most people can't really go into on like a podcast, let's say. Yeah. And man, I love it. And I'm super passionate about that.
I think the truth is you can learn everything you need to learn on the internet, but because there's so much information, it's hard to distill as you're kind of sorting through it. What's the right stuff until you already know it. And then at that point, you're like, well, I wish I would have known that this was right there, but you wouldn't have been able to tell the difference between this widget versus that widget. But when you end up paying for that, it's like the free stuff gets you interested enough to commit to the paid stuff that gets you to take action. And that action is where the benefit really is. It's less about the content and it's more about your commitment to action. And so you got to learn the stuff and you got to apply it right away so that you can make that a new habit.
Totally. And I know you have a online conference coming up. I'd love to give you an opportunity to talk about that before we jump off.
Absolutely. So the Investor Mindset Summit is coming up, and I would love for you guys to attend. Head to investormindsetsummit.com. What's amazing about this event, it's all online. It's totally digital, so no need to travel or spend thousands of dollars on hotels and planes. But it's 2 full days, 16 different speakers who are going to be teaching and training on the tactics of how to grow your real estate investing business and really set 2020 up to be an amazing year, but built upon the foundation of a rock solid mindset. So, incredible speakers like Neil Bawa, Rod Khleif, Mike Hambright, Adam Adams, Kathy Fettke, Bill Allen. The list keeps going on. There's a ton of phenomenal teachers and trainers who are going to be with us and really kind of giving it all away. And it's a no pitch event. The reason they're doing this is because they know the power of teaching and training people. And frankly, I built a good relationship with them on the podcast. So would love to have you guys there. Head to the website, investormindsetsummit.com. It's going to be a really great event and would love to see you guys there.
Very cool. Is there any other links you want us to provide in the show notes page?
Yeah, I would love it if you guys enjoyed this conversation. We have a lot of them on the Investor Mindset Podcast. You can head to theinvestormindsetpodcast.com and, shoot me a message on Facebook or Instagram at Steven.Pesavento. If you have any feedback or questions, would love to help you and would love to see you on the other side.
Very cool. And I'm actually going to link to our episode 101 as well, from selling parking spaces to $60 million under management, which is where I reposted an interview you did with me because I really enjoyed the interview, and it's kind of like a 100 episode kind of bonus. So we'll link to that. Steven, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thank you, brother.
All right, listeners, thanks for checking out the episode. As always, the contact information for our guest will be available in the show notes page, which is hosted on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher. Don't forget, if you want access to some of the free goodies that I'm talking about at the beginning of these episodes, like free ebooks, weekly investor emails, and articles about some of the most important investment-related topics, make sure that you have created an account with CFC because this stuff is automatically available. You can do this by going to cashflowconnections.com and signing up as an accredited investor. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at hunterthompson@cashflowconnections.com. Thanks again.